allegiance. Jim, can you lead us off?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Kevin, unfortunately, behind us. Is Anne Marie coming or not coming?
I'll go check on that one.
All right. Kevin has to sit by the computer, so we'll address you on your.
What I thought would be helpful to do is just kind of run through real quick a little history of how we got to where we are. It's very, very brief. It's just a few slides. If you recall, going back 8-10 months ago, to the planning study that we...
Oh, I'm going to need somebody to turn the camera to that.
Okay. The planning study that we worked on with the market study people resulted in the preferred alternate plan that you see on the screen right now. And the goals here were to obviously provide for the maximum amount of economic development that the property would be able to handle, and at the same time accommodate what is normally the wish on the part of the environmental groups to have the open space as contiguous as possible. So as a result, we came up with the plan that you see here. On the west side, the preserved area is most of the Pine Barrens core area that wouldn't be touched anyway. On the east side is the largest contiguous chunk of open space that we could arrange for, including a large portion of the grassland that was identified to be important for habitat purposes, and then the development areas that you see on the east, on the west side of the Berman subdivision that encompass the development that we were proposing. Following that, we came up with the preliminary subdivision plan that you see here. The development consisted of approximately 41 lots on about 800 total acres. Lots ranged from 5 acres thereabouts to about 35 acres maximum. And it called for the preservation of about 1,360 acres of woods, grassland, various vegetation. And in addition, what this did was provide for the preservation of about 250 acres of the grassland habitat that had been brought up, or started to be brought up at that time as being significant to the habitat needs. We also offered, or at least identified over on the east side, an area of about 270 acres that could be, to one degree or another, cleared to create additional grassland that would also be contiguous with the existing grassland that was to remain around the easterly runway. Following the development of that plan, the discussions with DEC started kind of in earnest, and we had a series of meetings. The DEC obviously was not happy with the loss of the existing grassland, and they countered our discussions with the map that you see here. I apologize, it's a little hard to see, but this is what I got from them. And what they did was they identified the red areas, the red outlined areas that you see there, that consist of about 750 acres of area that they considered suitable for development. The problem you see here is that the areas that they're identifying as suitable for development are pretty much spread all over the property. They're not contiguous. They don't provide for real contiguous habitat or open space protection, and they certainly don't provide for efficient development where we can interconnect all the utilities and infrastructure that's needed for the lots. What it also did, which was a concern, was eliminate a lot of the lots on Route 25, specifically right smack in the middle of the property where the two runways kind of converge. And obviously the lots on Route 25 are an important element to this because they would be the first lots that would be desirous on the part of developers. Just to kind of extend the analysis to explain to the DEC why this was a problem, we did a number of very quick and dirty sketches to kind of accommodate what they were looking for, at least explain what the result would be. This was the one that was most, that was closest to what they were looking for. And as you can see, and it's a little easier to see on here than it was on the previous slide, you can see how the development is scattered. You can kind of understand the additional costs that would be involved in extending the infrastructure to the limits of the property that you see here. Again, the lack of the lots along 25, which would be the most readily available. We're down to about 33 lots total in this case. The average size is slightly smaller than what was previously proposed, and then obviously it results in clearing quite a bit more of the site because you're going into the areas that were previously wooded out of necessity because they want you to stay out of the grassland. As part of these discussions, DEC also came back with what I guess they considered somewhat of a compromise. They identified some grassland preservation and some areas that could be adapted for grassland. The map you see here, again, I apologize for how difficult it is to see, but this is what I got from them. There are green areas outlined in the southwest corner of the property and along the easterly runway that total about 390 acres of existing grassland. It's required to eliminate about 6 lots. They had proposed possibly creating an additional 29 acres of grassland in areas where non-pine barrens, valuable trees have already been identified that they have pretty much no use for. But the key to this particular compromise was their suggestion that the entire easterly runway and the southwest portion of the westerly runway be covered and seeded. Basically, put topsoil over the runways, over the concrete runways, and throw some seed down. The result, and this was the key thing that we took away from this discussion, the result is that they seem to be happy with about 500 acres of grassland as a compromise toward getting someplace under development. Forgetting for a second whether, how practical it might be to cover the runways and actually grow anything over them. The key we took out of this, as I said, was the kind of goal that we assumed would be accommodating about 500 acres of grassland. The last meeting we had with them, the last discussion we had with them was based on this alternate subdivision layout that we prepared using that 500 acres as a goal.
And this was the one that the majority of the board sort of sketched out.
Yes,
when Congressman Hockbrook, were you here that day when we sketched out when we?
No.
No.
Okay, but this is based on that.
Right. This is based on the input from the town board that I got from you guys, and that goal of getting to a 500-acre number that we thought was kind of the goal line at the time. The layout you see here includes 38 lots, so we're down about 3 lots in the original layout. There's about 495 acres of existing grassland preserved, and again, it's a little hard to see here, but we eliminated lots around the southwest portion of the westerly runway, extending along the southern part of the westerly runway up into or up adjacent to the Berman subdivision there. So it's pretty much a majority of the south side of that westerly runway. We still preserve pretty much the entire easterly runway with the exception of 1 or 2 lots at the north end that we took out. But it does retain the important lots along 25. And as I said, it preserves about 495 acres of existing grassland and then provides for the possibility, if it made sense, to create another 65 or so through clearing areas that DEC has already identified as available for that kind of thing. This is where we're at. This was introduced to DEC at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. They followed up with a request for us to identify all of the existing grasslands that exist on the property so that they can assess where this puts them in terms of preserving as much of the grassland as possible. We provided that to them last week at some point. I know there are a couple of their staff on vacation, but we haven't gotten a response from that yet. My concern at this point is that obviously we've got no reaction from DEC on this. We thought we had achieved what they were looking for with the 500 acres or thereabouts of grassland. My concern is the fact that they seem to be digging in at the last meeting on a one-to-one preservation, which would require us to preserve about 640 acres of grassland now, which is what we identified exists about 610 acres of total development here, about 1,550 acres of undeveloped and or preserved area, which is greater than we originally
So we're down from 800 to 600. I mean,
thereabouts.
from my perspective, this has to be it. This is, the town has done far more than I think the original statute conveying this property from the federal government ever envisioned. This has to be it. Were they, my understanding from the meeting is they were receptive of this map.
They were receptive to a point. My concern is that they seem to be digging in on this one-to-one preservation now, which moves the goal line essentially from 500 acres to 600.
Jill is shaking her head that she didn't get that.
No, my sense is that I thought at that meeting that they were definitely moving towards the direction of this.
I agree that they thought this was a good starting point. My concern was a comment that Rob Marsh made, that this doesn't get us to one-to-one.
Okay, this is where this is where Congressman Hochberger, this should be his central focus, Anne Marie, at this point, that we've now gone from 800 up from 500 to 600, and, you know, the town has to say enough is enough. You're getting 500 acres of grassland, you got the, you know, Congressman Hochberger has the script, if you will, from the original preservation efforts, and so this should be, this and lead agency has to be his main focus, and it's probably time for the congressman to start moving to Albany on this conversation, because I would hate for the town to waste too much more time with the region on this. We've done what we can do. If they're not receptive, then this has to get back to the governor's office. I mean, I'm stunned at this point that we're down from 800 to 600. But I, as supervisor, am not willing to go any further. They need to be somewhat accommodating, which apparently they may not be. We don't know.
We don't know because there hasn't been a reaction to this yet, at least formally.
Councilman Wooten and I met with the New York State DEC on December 14th. And they indicated that an application has not been made yet to the DEC, otherwise they would put their correspondence in writing as to what they were looking for, and instead of these meetings that are, you know, taking place. So I have a concern that an application on any of these layouts hasn't been made, and that these discussions are all taking place without any paper follow-up. One.
There's an email that you have with the
Okay, well, we don't have them as the board.
The problem, I want to be tactful here, the DEC was very upset that council members were meeting independent of what the majority of the board was doing. And they said to me, that what is it the town wants if you have two board members coming to meet on one thing and you have consultants and everything else meeting on something else. So I don't think that's a good idea for the board to do that. We try to bring everything back.
We heard a different story when we were there.
Yes.
But we,
Well, the second part of that.
but I can just tell you that when we went to the DEC, we did very little talking.
Anyway.
And they told us what they wanted. And basically what they said is that they wanted the westerly runway preserved and the southwest corner of the site preserved, and that the easterly side of the runway could be developed, and that they said, we want you to put soil over the westerly runway, and we want you to create a grassland habitat on the westerly runway and mow it once every 5 years for a 20-year period. So, you know, our fear, or my fear, going into the meeting with the annuity and with the article that they adopted that said that you had to basically set up an annuity and follow the
What annuity?
She means the Article 182.
right, the Article 182, where it said that you have to not only enhance the habitat for the tiger salamanders and for the birds, but you have to track it and make sure that they are growing and that they're safe, and that's not what we got from the meeting. So I was relieved to hear that all they were concerned about was creating a grass habitat on the westerly runway and mowing it once every 5 years for a 20-year period. So that was reassuring, and that's something that I got out of that meeting.
Here's the problem. The town has to go to the DEC with a common voice. If you two board members want to do this, then there's no sense in having VHB. Everything that VHB has done has been brought back to the board on a quarterly basis as you've requested. Anne Marie has come. They have meetings on a regular basis. Not too much has been, every time there's a major shift, we bring it to the board to talk to you about it. You cannot deal with a regulatory agency having two voices. You have to come at them with one voice. And I will say to you that we received, I don't know if we're going to discuss the VHB letter today. It has to be one voice. You can't have independent meetings. 3 members of the board, or 4 members of the board, I honestly
I was going to say, I think, I didn't go there with an agenda at all. So
We went to listen.
I don't say, there was no lack of commonality in my meeting with the TDC.
But
I wasn't there in opposition to anything that I've been supporting your entire supervisorship on supporting this plan. So 100% I've been behind you with this. So I wasn't there with a different plan. I was there only as a fact finder myself, because when you hear different things, I wanted to talk. Actually, I was hoping it was going to be a private meeting with Peter. I didn't realize he was going to bring in the staff. But it was, I more or less wanted to know what some of the stumbling blocks were to help. And again, to get to the same goal that we're here to.
That's why we have VHB, that's why we have the quarterly reports, that's why Anne Marie, because what the DEC did.
But you know, there's a lot of spin out there, and you know, sometimes you have to go right to the source and find out what is the spin.
But that's the problem, because the spin is coming from the DEC.
Well, exactly.
And what the DEC has now done, and quietly, is the town of Riverhead doesn't know what they want. Because 2 board members met, they get very fidgety when elected officials meet.
I mean, well, I get the impression from them, it's still a town decision. They're not locked into anything. They just.
As a matter of fact, those were their exact words, is that it's whatever the town submits in an application for us. You guys have been having these meetings with us, and every time you come to us, it's a different discussion, and if you would just, file an application.
No. But that's wrong, and that's where you're getting bait and switched by the DEC. You're getting connived by the DEC. And here's how, and we all know this. If you file right now, if you file the application, the DEC is going to take lead agency status, and you're going to wind up with nothing that you want. So what the DEC is kind of trying to hoodwink you into doing, Jody, is file an application, because then it's over. In fact, several consultants have said to me that if the DEC gets lead agency and they get to do what they want, it's not worth probably pursuing anymore. So that's why it's so critical that you trust your consultants, you trust your deputy. It's not even me. I don't go to the meetings. They get all fidgety when an elected official comes. You trust the consultants, you trust Congressman Hochberger, you trust Anne Marie Prudenti and Jill Lewis, and let them do what they're doing, because we're very close here.
I got that impression from them at the meeting, but like I said, I wasn't there to do an alternate plan. I wasn't there to upset the apple cart. I was there merely to recognize what you probably already know, but I am not astute to, is what some of the problems were. That's all.
And I think it would be better for you to call Kevin Walsh, I'm saying Terry Elkowitz, and talk to them, because these are the people that are going to the meetings. If you're not, you know, if staff at Town Hall are not available, call Kevin and Terry and talk to them, because they go to the meetings. That's what we wanted them to do, and what came back, and they laughed. I'm going to say that the person I spoke to, the DEC, was laughing.
Well, we know you have a relationship with Peter Scully, so a friendship as well as a working relationship. So that is, I'm not surprised, because he was probably questioning why we were there too, because he knows that you guys are handling it. But I felt reassured walking out of that meeting that the direction that we're going in is a positive one, and I'm just hoping that we maximize the land, because when a map is presented to me and it's outlined in red of all the areas that are capable of being developed, you know, I have questions as to the acreage that could be developed and the acreage that ultimately is going to be developed based on the subdivision map that we're submitting. So I wanted to know if they had areas of concern on the land that they would want to see preserved, and that's the answer that I got.
But that's why you asked Kevin Walsh, because the DEC can't tell you that. Kevin just told you all the numbers. He can tell you all the numbers of all the various different maps that we've looked at. That's what we're paying.
I sense that this is probably going to be the end result.
I hope so.
Yes,
But
I think so too, because it shows
whether they
the,
snicker behind our back, I can't speak to that. It was a good meeting, and it wasn't one to I'm telling you, it was not one.
I know you didn't go in.
There was no intention to sit there and say.
I know you didn't. I know you didn't. But I know that what the DEC came back and said to me, and I know what the DEC said to others, that doesn't help the town.
but this shows more land being developed than the map that we discussed at work session last week, because it does have lots to the east of the easterly runway. And, you know,
This is
that,
the map that we laid out before Christmas, where we sketched out certain areas and said, try to offer them this.
We wanted 25.
I mean, this is, from, as far as I'm concerned, this is kind of that proverbial line in the sand with the DEC. You know, 600, we're going to only develop 600 acres and 1,500 is
610 acres, yeah.
the DEC.
but we're up from 500, so that's better.
Well,
We went in with 800.
Right?
Wanted 41 lots, now we're down to 38 lots.
And that's why I feel that we're moving in the right direction. And I like the lots on the east, to the east of the easterly runway, because the easterly runway is an active runway, and I feel that those lots will be very valuable to somebody that has the need
That's like so
to
much planes.
fly in and fly out. And that wasn't on the map that had previously been submitted.
That was on the map that we sketched out.
That work session,
On
yes.
Wednesday. That was on that map, not Wednesday, before Christmas. So, I guess back to Congressman Hochbruckner, that's what we need from him, is that, you know, this is it, give us your opinion. And then, I think if the region doesn't come forward within the next week or two, then I think Congressman Hochbruckner should.
They're supposed to get back to Kevin in the next week, after Ron Marsh got back.
Yeah, Ron Marsh is on vacation this week.
I'll speak
Nice.
to Congressman Hochbruckner. He was in yesterday, and for the past at least 2 weeks, he's been working at the federal level with the Defense Department, going through the entire history and getting the support there, going back to the original conveyance, the lifting of the reverter clause, and so he wants the Defense Department to be prepared if there's a problem to support whatever plan that we want.
And I think that's what the,
Well, that'd be good for Endgame.
I think, yeah, that could be the end.
I don't think we need to go that far, but it's good to have.
Well, I think the feeling is it'll support the map that we want and the legislation at the same time.
So if we can concentrate him on this map, if that's the consensus of the members of the board, and the lead agency status.
And this is the 38 lots with the 610 development?
More or less, yeah, yes.
It's almost.
Now, I'm curious, Kevin, when you're getting ready to file this map, are you showing these lots at 100% build out, because the Pine Barrens legislation goals of preservation of 35% have been met by the open space area?
We're showing them as available, you know, up to a certain standard that you're going to establish with the zoning code, but the 35% preservation doesn't come into play on the lots themselves, because it's all in the
Good.
preservation area.
So they're
Not-
100% build out.
Not a problem for the lots.
Is there any way that
Well,
you
no,
can
it's
think
not
of?
100% build out, because you have your floor area ratios and lot coverage.
Subject to zoning.
Well, floor area ratios and lot coverage as far as the town is concerned, but not necessarily as far as the DEC is concerned and the Pine Barrens Commission.
Right.
So I just wanted to be sure of that. And then also, is there any way, because we are preserving so many acres, that the core area or the map of Calverton Camelot, if there can be additional build out on those lots? Because a lot of those businesses within the core area that are functioning today have the need and have come before the planning board to build out, but they exceed the clearing that was proposed in the map of the Calverton Camelot. Is there any way that we can shift some of that preservation over to the previous filed subdivision map?
I don't know the particulars of how that map was filed and what covenants and restrictions are in place and that kind of thing, and what their numbers are, but in the grand scheme of things, I suppose it's possible.
It's possible, but here's the, and I know the answer to this, so I'm going to answer it, and Kevin, you can fill,
Sure.
you can jump in. The answer is really no, because if you were to try to take some of the 35% clearing restriction off of those lots, then you have to put it on something else that the town has, and that will reduce the town's yield, because the DEC is not necessarily letting us double count. We have the 35%, we have the grasslands. It would be very difficult to try to open that subdivision up without having to preserve more property on our part.
Yeah, we would certainly not want to commit to something like that until we had a commitment from DEC that they'll count the grassland as natural area, and that's,
And then
Pine
at a
Barrens
later
Commission
date, we
doesn't
might be
even
able
do that.
to.
well, that's going to be the fight.
Okay.
Yeah, I would not even want to try to open
No,
that.
What's the total preserved?
Total preserved is about 1,500.
Plus the 35% on the Berman property, plus,
Because I would think that it would be
But that
much more
includes
desirable from the DEC to have contiguous open space than it would to have the
That's
scattered,
That's why the
preserved.
map was developed the way it was originally, that's correct.
Understood, but the original subdivision map of the core area of Calverton Camelot, you have preserved here, preserved here, preserved here, preserved here, preserved here, and it would, make sense to me from a New York State economic regional approach that if these companies within the original subdivision map want to expand, that, it doesn't make sense to have all these scattered preserved areas on these industrial lots.
I
So,
just,
but that's a discussion for a later day, but I just want to, if we could somehow in the subdivision map that we submit to the DEC, show the 35%. So if we're showing this much is buildable area, this is what 35% would be, and this is what's left.
Ultimately, we would identify that area.
Good.
all right, so I guess, Kevin, what we're doing is waiting for the DEC and to react to this. And anybody else?
Formally proposed?
Well, we don't formally propose it until
Oh, I know,
we
right.
know about lead agency status. And that's the bait and switch, one of the bait and switch things with the DEC. They constantly say, well, the town of Riverhead we never turned anything down. They've never submitted anything. But
Well, the bottom line is that that's why we hired you guys, to make sure that something is palatable for everybody. So that there should be no, what if I get engaged, or I hope not.
well, it's interesting because all these 6 or 8 months of meetings were all from the DEC. The DEC wanted us to do these pre-application meetings. We probably would have just submitted the original application and thought about lead agency status a long time ago, and we probably would have lost it, and it would be in the commissioner's hearing, and it would be a mess.
We've had those fights before.
So this is proposing to move the wild scenic recreational river line on the southwest corner, or?
I'm leaving that up to them at this point because they may want to clean up that line in some respects. It's not absolutely necessary for what we're doing here. We're staying out of all the areas that they're concerned about. It's not critical to this map.
Okay.
It could probably be done to clean things up and make a little bit more sense out in the line, but it's not critical to this map.
Okay.
All right, Kevin, thank you. Appreciate all the hard work on this. I guess we're going to discuss that letter next week. Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Jeff and Rick.
Building permit fee structure.
This should be relatively, just want to give them some direction.
Look at that.
So, I'll let you guys present this. We talked briefly about, staff talked briefly about incentivizing our urban renewal areas with reduced permit fees. And I want to get a sense from you guys and a sense of the board whether we want to try to do that.
Well, we obviously had the two target areas being Cal and the downtown areas are, those areas are under the control of the town board in terms of the permitting process. Those areas that we're trying to direct development towards and trying to provide some sort of carrot to these areas. One area that we're doing that is obviously reducing fees too. And one area of doing that is through the application process, either through the site plan or through the building department. So, or both. So, last year for the budgetary process, I took a look at both the site plan application fees and also the building department to see whether or not I would make a recommendation to the board to increase them based on our review of surrounding municipalities.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep, thank you.
I took a look at that, and I shared a copy of cable with the supervisor's office, and our fees, some adjacent towns were higher, and other towns were lower. And overall, my recommendation was not to change our fees going forward at this time. For the town as a whole. To increase them, not to increase them.
So keep the same.
Keep it the same.
Can we see that fee schedule, the comparison?
No, because it was just an internal multi-jurisdictional table that was developed.
They can have it.
But we did not prepare it, so we're not the author of it. But we had, we obviously took a look at our numbers to see whether or not what was on the chart was accurate, and it was overall. It was our period house over for people.
Right, so I understand that, because we're in the middle of the road, we're higher than some and lower than others, and we should say about the same, that makes sense. But
And it's difficult to do it apples to apples, because, for example, Southampton does not have a commercial development that we do. And their fees, they don't want it.
we don't want them to have either.
So, but the fees proportionately there are higher than ours for site plan fees. But when you take a look at other towns like Brookhaven, which is somewhat lower, but when you take a look at some of the western towns that have the higher commercial development, that compared to what we have, we're on par with it.
Our site plan is based on a dime per square foot to start there. Some of the other towns are on a flat fee basis, depending upon how many square feet of building. If we were to think about decreasing the site plan review fees downtown, I don't know how much that would really incentivize, because most of the properties downtown don't really have disturbed ground as a function of the site
Isn't
plan.
there a lot of incentives already in place? I mean, this would just be more on top of it. I mean,
Cadcal's a different story.
I'm talking about urban renewal, I'm talking about downtown, Riverhead, whatever it is.
We have a IDA.
You have the IDA.
Basically, the downtown site plans are $500 for a site plan. There's no disturb.
And it's very minimal in terms of,
It's not prohibited in any way for some people.
no. It's
Even
not
with
every
demolition
restaurant.
on downtown, we subtract the existing foundation area,
Okay.
so that's not even a consideration. So we're talking about marginal amounts of money.
So this is really
FCAL, however,
more.
would
More for
be-
FCAL.
downtown would be more building permit impact, and FCAL for more site plans. That's my view.
If the support want to see, have staff look at, make a recommendation as to what type of incentive.
I mean, we can take a look at those two areas and see whether or not the building permit fees are for those two different areas, and also for site plan maybe, because those two areas are under the town board, come back to with a recommendation for those two specific areas.
I would be in favor of that, anything. We want to incentivize both of those areas.
I think it's a great idea. I think we also need to look at expedited review on an overtime basis, because we have cut down significantly on staff throughout the town over the years that we've been in office. And, we're down to 2 fire marshals, and the plans review is for the commercial buildings, and the building department is 1 person that's reviewing those commercial applications for the plans. So I think to move these projects along and get a shovel in the ground and get the jobs that we need going and get the tax base that we need going, or at least on our way towards an increased tax base. If someone should seek the IDA incentives is important. And I think that I'd like to see a comparison also of the fire marshal fees, because we are down one fire marshal, and we charge $100 for the applications for the fire marshal, and it's a significant plan review. And I think that if we took a look at that on an expedited review, as other towns do, that it would speed up the applications that are being filed on a regular basis that would be reviewed during business hours. Because if you have a stack here,
You're talking generically, you're not talking
yes,
about urban renewal areas. You're talking about
generically throughout
townwide.
the town, right? So if you have a stack over here that's people that don't want to expedite, and then you have a stack over here that wants to be expedited, you're going to have this stack looked at during business hours, and this stack looked at on an overtime basis that would be paid for directly by the developer.
You know, it's interesting because I was asked to write a legal opinion about that, and I contacted, I don't remember if it was Supervisor Cardinale or Supervisor Kazakevich, and the Association of Towns said it's not permissible to do that.
But Brookhaven's been doing it
I
for at
understand.
least 10 years.
And the research came back at the time that it was not permissible to do that.
But no one's ever argued, and people appreciate the fact that they can pay a couple $100 extra and get their application looked at. And it actually speeds up the review of the people that don't expedite their applications, because you don't have all these expedited applications in the mix.
Site plans were not behind, right?
I think
The fire marshal's office is behind, because they're
In terms of site
currently,
plan review?
yes, because they're looking at, they have several applications, practically 5 applications that are pending. They have Costco, they have
Costco's
Walmart, they
done.
have,
We finished it.
not with the fire marshal, they're not.
But the planning board is willing to pass essentially a final conditional plan subject to certain conditions. One might be fire marshal review.
Yeah, but they're backed up in plan review, and our chief fire marshal that we have is, you know, he's doing it when he can, but, you know, they're expected to go out and look at places of assembly on an annual basis, and then all the other businesses in town at least once every 3 years, and they're far behind. So public safety is important that they keep up on those inspections, and they're not finding the time to spend in the office to review these site plans. And I think that we either need to authorize overtime to get these building plans approved by the fire marshal so that we can get the shovels in the ground, get the jobs, and get the tax base. And we also need to make sure that the developers know that that when they come in, that their plans are going to be looked at within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and they're going to have a response back. We did it with the SWIP, and it seems to be working very well.
It's different with the SWIP, and what I would agree is what we talked about with the SWIP, but Costco, Walmart are delayed on their end, not our end. I check with this every couple days, it's delayed on our end, not our end.
We'll check with the fire marshal, because
But
he's
it's
got
not
plans.
delayed on our end. They haven't done what they have to do to get everything done. In fact, Costco, we were going to give them their foundation permit last year. They applied for the foundation permit. There's like one last piece that Sharon is waiting for, and they haven't given it to us. So they have slowed it down.
That's because they've gotten reviews from the building department, but they haven't gotten any correspondence from the fire marshal's office.
No, it has nothing to do with the fire marshal, because it is a building permit, a foundation permit. But what I would think with the fire marshal, and I've been a big advocate of this the entire time, is to have, we had Bruce Johnson come in and use his firm for these large reviews. When you have a Costco or a Walmart, and it shouldn't necessarily be done by the fire marshal. The fire marshals have bucked that, but I think now that the new structure of the fire marshal being under the building department, I think the building department administrator previously didn't necessarily support that. I'm thinking that there might be some support for having a private firm do this. We don't use that one.
I know it, but streamlined.
And that would keep our fire marshals in the field doing what they have to do.
Just as an aside, I would invite the board to go in to the planning department and look at all of the files at one time in cabinets.
I've seen them.
That have MyLars that are approved, waiting for covenants to be recorded. I mean, it's all 100%. Most of it's on the other end. And I don't know what the problems are.
It doesn't seem the Costco, it's
Financial. Well, I like
Well,
Costco,
whether it's
but,
financing
you know,
or
the financing.
It's tough to get financing.
for one reason or another, they're just delaying there, and they, yes, the hurry up, wait, we hurry up, we get it done, and then there's a delay on the private sector side to actually catch up to us.
I mean, I don't know that we're behind. I ask this question all the time in staff meetings. I don't know that we're behind on any of our reviews. I know site plans.
Jeff's doing reviews, we're having the bull by the horns and we're doing reviews ourselves.
You really are, and you really stepped it up, and I thank you for that, because.
Thank you, Jeff, for putting this.
Yes. Well, no, because Jeff's looking at site plans too, so it's, that process is great, and now we're sharing the site plan review, and the backlog has been shortened. I guess I'm just concerned about the fire marshal, so I just want to make sure that they're keeping up with the pace of the site plan approval and the building department.
What Sean mentioned is that, if we need to, on larger projects, we walk it out to our right.
I spoke to
So
Bruce
they're
Johnson
renewable
about
building
that,
permit fee structure, so you're saying the structure's okay?
do that for me.
Well, no, on the, in terms of the
Yeah,
structure,
exactly.
that we go back and take a look at both the Cal and the downtown in terms of those fees, and see what, because it may be, for example, the Cal.
I just see it as a bullet point here, but we really should.
We're not on the bullet point now.
I know we're off, but I'm trying to bring us back. That's all.
Good job. So do we want, as a board, to have you look at some sort of incentivized, maybe you get a building maybe the building permits are incentivized for these areas, or maybe site plan, I don't.
Maybe one for one area, then the other for the other.
Right. And maybe we put the onus on them that, your building permit will be reduced if you get a shovel in the ground within 30 days. There's no reason to give somebody an incentive, reduced building permit, and then they don't start construction.
And we've already done our part as far as the renewals and making it 25% of the original permit cost, because there was no plan review and everything else. So we've lessened the burden on developers for not putting a shovel in the ground right away, and we're still getting 25% of what the original permit fee was. And I think the least expensive permit fee that I've seen for these big developments has been about $16,000. So we're still getting $4,000 for renewing the permit. I think it's a good idea, but I'd also like to see a comparison of the fire marshal fees and make sure that the taxpayers of the town are not subsidizing the developers when it comes to the fire marshal review, based on the fire marshal's time in looking at these plans and these applications. I think that the $100, if it's taking them 3 weeks to look at a set of plans, the taxpayers of the town are subsidizing that review, and the developers should be paying for it.
All right, so you're going to look at some fee comparisons. All right, thank you. We await your report. All right, Ray.
Yes, sir.
Come on up. Dan McCormick, I saw him walk in.
Yes, yeah, Dan Lane.
Good morning.
Council members.
Thank you, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
This is to approve the contract and the budget for the bid this year.
Raise that up.
Keeps losing more weight, he's gonna just disappear over there.
It's working
All
out.
right, so what do we got?
Dan Lane.
This is our,
You have copies for us, sir?
I don't, we just met
Jill was
yesterday.
making them.
I'm sorry. I have my name.
Do we have copies of the?
Scott was bringing it. I'll make copies for you.
Well, you should tell Scott. We didn't know. So anyway, how you doing?
Good.
I'm doing Jim Dandy. Yep, things are firing. Got some new stuff in the hopper for downtown. I see some new stores opening up. This is looking good.
Is a ballet store coming?
Yep.
Ballet?
I should see you in tutu.
See me in a tutu, you've got some imagination. I don't know why you would want to, but.
All right, so give us some of the highlights of, while we're getting that copy of our,
This is
bid
just budget stuff.
Oh,
I don't have it. Your email.
Perfect.
Oh, it's attached to it. It's attached
less of a budget this year.
They have 81.6 to spend
Right.
on bid and expenses as well as events.
And what's the levy?
25%.
You talking about the administrative charge?
No, the levy, the total tax levy for the business improvement district.
14, 111?
103?
Yeah, yeah.
103.6.
Thank you.
But there was, I guess, there's an administrative charge back 2010, 29.
It's a charge back in 2013 based on 2011 expenses. Yeah.
We reduced it,
Which
we're
was
trying to reduce it across the board slowly as we can, but it's
But that was a
possible.
big year, right? Thank you, Jim.
That's okay.
I didn't actually make copies because Ray and I met yesterday and we just, the numbers that we agreed to and the numbers that came out in the sheet didn't work because the math is whatever, and Ray and I didn't have a chance to speak, so I didn't make copies because I didn't know where he wanted to take it from.
Okay,
The
so
marketing is where we
I'll
get
get
it.
one.
The total 2013 budget is 80, right now it's 88.7.
Okay.
It should be 81.6.
Right.
So Ray is gonna reduce the marketing to 49,000 over here. This 49, he wants to reduce that by the
Okay.
9,000 to bring it down to the 81.6.
okay.
Marketing and advertising is the biggest chunk of the budget. One of the reasons it is because we promote downtown with other events that we don't normally do. We do advertising for the other events that are downtown and nonprofits. But we're trying to redo our book that goes to all the train stations. We want to change it because there are new businesses downtown. We want to highlight some of those businesses, and it's part of the marketing.
Is this new Christmas lights? New Christmas lights?
Yeah, we have to change some of the
Oh,
wreaths.
that would be nice.
They're pretty beat up.
Yes, that's great.
I was on the bid board when we bought those wreaths.
We didn't have to, we
A long time ago.
And they're very expensive,
Put
but,
up in the top.
you know, they last for a few years, but
Yeah.
it's
I don't know
time
if
for
it's-
them to be changed.
These ones
The
are down
accountant-
to events.
Uh,
These ones are like just to purchase some lights. It's not really events, so it's pretty good.
Scott, can we do their accounting work for them, or is that something that has to be independent for them?
I have to look into it, I'm not sure. That's something they've always had, the 2,500 for their accounts, but they had their tax returns and stuff. You're asking if we can do that
Yeah.
for them? Probably we could, but I have to look into it.
Well, let's say, that would save you, especially since we're taking the big from you anyway. If we could do this in-house,
Okay.
that would be a $2,500 savings. So let's see if that's something we can do. You know, it may be a requirement that they have to have an independent audit, but I don't think so. We do that.
I don't think there's an audit, I think it's just the tax returns.
So why don't we see if we can do that in-house? I'd love to be able to save that.
Thank you.
So I'm looking here and it says that the events are $29,500, but then I see advertising and marketing is $49,000. So the advertising and marketing is for the events, correct?
For those events and other events in the town, we always advertise other events. The street fair, we advertise the country fair, but again, we also put out that book that goes to all the train stations from Manhattan to Montauk. It goes in the kiosks at all the train stations.
It really is basically that 49,000 is pretty much your operating budget, really, what you do.
Yeah, we eliminated a
Everything else is
secretary.
specified, this is only
We
other.
eliminated rent for an office, which will,
Because that 49 is not 49, it's down to 41.
right, 41 and change.
41, yeah, it's less than 8,100, so.
Oh, because it says on the proposed budget in the email, $49,000.
Yeah, no, I made a mistake.
There's a math error in the email.
Right.
Ray didn't realize when we sat it down.
So 81.
Okay, because I don't see that on your spreadsheet.
The 49,000?
Yep.
Yeah, it's
First column, Jody.
right here.
First column, I see 29.
49 right here.
Oh, advertising up top.
Yeah.
Got it, okay. So 49,000 for advertising.
That's the
No,
one
it's
that's gonna
changed.
change by,
41.
Okay. I was reading in the paper, Ray, your suggestions about cameras downtown and things of that
Yes.
nature. I don't see that in your budget anywhere.
No,
Is
because that can come from the parking district,
Okay.
which
Your
I'm also
parking
a
district
member
has
on.
money?
Yes, they do. And it's not as much as when we first priced it out. It's drastically reduced.
Right, because now they have the remote cameras and everything, it doesn't have to necessarily be hardwired.
Right, it's like the ones you have on Summerwood that you're using there right now. They're very inexpensive now.
And it's nice because the police, you give the police a PIN code to the remote camera and they can access that camera from headquarters.
I spoke to the police in New York City about their cameras, and they said they keep a recording for 3 days. Because whenever there's a crime and they know they have cameras in the area, they review those cameras within a 3-day time. The reason it's 3 days is because sometimes there's a holiday in there, so. But they don't hold the tapes for longer than that. They don't have anybody watching the cameras all the time.
Right, but if there is a crime, they can access it.
They also use it for fires. The fire departments use it so they know if they need extra equipment. So it's really a good thing to have. It gives people a sense of security too. I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Well,
And especially, I mean, you could have signs saying this area under surveillance by, cameras, so people know that there's a camera watching them and they're less likely to commit a crime. But I'm wondering, and this might be a question for the assessor's office, if there can be a $100, if all the businesses, because there are, how many properties within the business improvement district that actually pay taxes towards the business improvement district? I don't necessarily need the answer to that question now, but if those businesses decide to put a camera up and have a recording device in their store or in their place of business, that you might be able to give them back $100 a year on their bid taxes to incentivize them to have this system that is not only going to protect their business, but it's going to allow access for police if there is a crime. Then you might get some of the parcels that are outside of the parking district that wouldn't, do you know what I'm saying? Because the parking district is going to be the parking areas, essentially, that would be covered by the cameras, not necessarily on Main Street, which is...
I don't know how you could get a reduction in their taxes. That would probably have to be something passed by New York State.
Yeah. Or even a rebate, do you know what I'm saying, from the bid? I don't know.
It's with the bid and it's tax money.
So you couldn't do a...
You're going to pay somebody to put cameras in?
Yeah.
I have a question with the budget.
I barely have a budget here as it is.
The contract's got,
Well, that's this year.
I know there was a small amount of reserve that's being bid there, the reserves is being also.
Yeah, we usually.
So there's no more reserve.
There's no reserves.
We're just spending what we make every year.
Right,
Which is,
correct.
well, that's what we want you to do, so.
All the reserves we use.
You're not doing your job if you have money to it.
Yeah, this was not supposed to be a piggyback.
That's right.
Like, can we start from the top down so we can go through these things
Sure.
in fashion, orderly fashion? So we're going to see if we can do the accounting services.
Right.
I think if it's only tax returns,
I've never seen one else.
okay, so if it's only tax returns, I think we can do it. In fact, I know somebody in your office that's got some specialty in that, so. Yeah, that'll be a good savings.
It's just a simple form, I'll do it for $5.
$5, you're cheap.
Well, we don't have any employees, so it makes it easy.
Yeah, right.
All right, insurance, $2,500, what is that?
Board of Directors Insurance.
Okay, you have to have that.
Can I have a question on that? So this money solely is going to cover board of directors liability, not general liability for accidents and such.
No.
So in terms of the board, I need direction from you folks. In previous contracts, we have required the BIDMA to carry its own liability insurance because of the town's $150,000 donor, which requires the town to expend $150,000 in any loss before our own insurance kicks in.
Yeah, we understand that.
So at this point, I understand that given the less revenues that we have for this year, is that the board's direction to me as the director of the contract that we're going to cover liability for the BIDMA from our own insurance. And to do that, I've already spoken with our insurance broker. We can do that with the understanding that we are co-sponsoring all of the designated events
Well,
that
we
are
are.
under our control.
Well, we are
Yeah,
the
of
bid.
course we are.
They don't do any event without
We've
our
always
approval.
been that way. That's $1,900 savings right there.
There you go.
Okay, so my understanding is we are not going to require liability
Yeah,
insurance.
we're
but we will cover
co-sponsors.
that, notwithstanding the $150,000 donation.
Yeah, we're we're not co-sponsors, we are the sponsors.
We are.
You're the volunteers.
You have to run it past us, we can do it.
But one thing that I would like to do, because of all these events, and we've had discussions whether the coverage from the people that are actually serving, or we have it at 5 million, that's what our insurance company recommends. I'd like to see a new policy and a resolution to change that to 2 million, because that was the desire of the majority of the board.
What
So-
insurance?
The local liability insurance when they have a,
Yeah, because the board
We
voted
never,
to
we
reduce
never
it.
voted to make it 5 million. We never, there's no vote anywhere.
No, our insurance company requested 5 million, and the board, the majority of the board voted to reduce it to 2 million, that the,
You're
that
talking
the
about
people
when there's
had to
alcohol.
put up.
You're talking
Right.
alcohol.
So
There's
we
never
need
been a
to,
formal vote on that.
well, there should be, is what I'm saying.
it's actually, when you add up the people that are selling alcohol, it is more than 2 million.
Well, that could be put in the resolution.
4 or 5 of them,
I don't think it's not, we can help.
but they're really,
Because it's, you know what, it comes up every year, and it's always a bone of contention, and we should just put it in a resolution and say, because of this reason, this reason, this reason, because all the vendors are each posting 2 million, that the liability from the vendors that are serving will be more than 5 million, so therefore, from the individual vendors, we'll
I'd
accept
like
a
to
$2
get
million
legal
policy.
opinion about that before we go forward with the resolution in executive session.
Okay, I just know that this board could change in 2014, and if it's the desire of this board to do that, it could be different for other boards, and they're gonna be, you
They
know,
can change it in a minute.
about the whole
Yeah,
thing.
there's
Well,
nothing,
They can change it in a minute, but you're talking about insurance, you're talking about legal liability.
Right,
Yeah,
I think it's an executive session conversation.
yeah.
and, so this
Can we
board
just start
insurance
down
for the
the top?
25, yeah, I'm doing it. The board insurance for the 2,500,
Mm-hmm.
that, we were talking about insurance, which is why it came up.
That's
The
the
board
record.
insurance for the 2,500, that's D&O.
Yes.
Gina, who's Gina?
Directors
He's
and
on our police-
officers.
He's on our police force. You
Okay.
know him.
Office supplies, $200.
$200, what are you stealing supplies from town hall? How are you doing this on $200?
Basically, it's just for stamps to do the,
Stamps, it's only 4 rolls of stamps.
the tax exemptions that we do.
And they are stealing paper from town hall, fine, we'll supply you paper.
That's what it's for. We do all the tax exemptions for people.
We'll supply you the paper, we have it. All right, so we talked about the 49,000 for the advertising, cardboard boat race. All these are pretty static numbers because you have had a lot of experience with them, I guess, right?
We didn't need anything new.
The 3,000 for the cardboard boat race, is that, what's included in that $3,000?
There are supplies we buy, as you know. There's trophies that we buy. There's hula hoops that we buy. It all adds up to $3,000 by the time we're done with everything. We pay for the DJ, you know.
Okay, so you have,
Oh, yeah. The way we come up with these numbers is we
Budgets
go
for
through
these.
what we spent the year before. Because sometimes numbers change. So whatever we spent the year before, we keep track. We have a folder, and then we go through that folder and we see what it came to, and that's how we come up with the
It
number.
really costs you $7,500 to have the cars, cruise nights on Thursday nights?
I'm
This was
surprised it's that
every week.
every week. I'm surprised it's that little.
Yeah, we changed it a little bit.
And that's just hiring music?
It's a DJ, and it's the people that direct the traffic.
Which you need.
Yeah.
Are we gonna be having to move it to the north side, you think, this year?
Yeah, it's gonna have to go somewhere else. It
To the
can't
north
be
side?
that side. With Summerwind and with the restaurants there, there's really not gonna be
a
any.
new ballet place, a dance studio,
Yeah.
Blue
No,
Dot.
I'm not saying on that, but you
Yeah.
have a
Well,
restaurant
Thursday
over
night, I
there,
think
and
it's,
restaurants, you know,
AA
use a
over
lot
at
of
our
parking.
church, there goes that parking lot.
So can we use, what's that?
I said, I think Thursday night's a big AA night at our church. They use most of the parking lot behind Wolford.
That would be,
Uh-oh.
all right, well, we have to figure that out. Don't want to change Thursday night AA either, but
No, well, they'll be there, they might have to walk.
no serving alcohol then.
No, lots of coffee.
All right, well, I mean, that has to be resolved, and, you know, I'm happy to see it on, I loved it on the south side and filled the parking lot up, and let's try it on the north side. And then, I know there's this sort of live at 5 theme that they're talking about.
Main Street,
Main
thinking about Main Street.
Oh, like they do with Patro?
Yeah. about if we could do that. That would solve the problem, because you still have parking in all the parking lots. We just close Main Street and have the cars park at an angle all the way down Main Street.
I don't know if we would do that every Thursday,
No, we couldn't do
but I would like to see if we can continue the car show, because it brings so many people downtown.
that. And I think they would be encouraged to use more of the restaurants and things if they're on Main Street too. Basically brings closer to the restaurants.
A couple times a year. In other words, do the cruise nights
Right.
and then have this as an addition to that. But that's going to be funded separately, is what I gather, if there's enough interest.
Right.
That's Eastern Arts Council, isn't CAD working with South Theater?
Yeah.
On the main street.
If there's enough interest, then I guess they'll move forward with that. Okay.
They're going for a grant, actually.
I like that idea, because I've heard from a few businesses that are a part of the bid that they feel left out of a lot of these events because they are on the riverfront. So you have Diggers and you have Hiting and you have, Portos and other places that are feeling left out. So I think that would be a great thing, is if you shut down Main Street and have the cars parked both sides down Main Street.
Shut down Main Street every Thursday is what he's saying.
Not every Thursday, but even if it was only a couple nights out of the year, and get the permits through the police department to close it down. I mean, there's plenty of ways to get around this Second Street, and once you start, directing traffic down those ways, then hopefully it'll clean up those areas a little bit, but.
Okay, does anybody else have any other issues with these events right there? So now we're down to 81,600. Guess we've gone through everything.
The only other question, Sean, I guess, is the payment schedule.
Okay, quarterly?
Well, Ray was looking for 3 payments.
Because it's a lot less money.
Okay.
And we have to do, a lot of the stuff is front-loaded. Like events, we have to put up deposits for those in advance.
And you're over by the summer anyway, for the most part, so yeah, that seems to make sense to me. So what about the board?
First payment now.
I didn't read that either.
I put it February 7th in line with the check line as well as the other 2.
It's fine. Do you need, not that we have office space, but do you need office space? We couldn't necessarily give it to you on Main Street, but maybe
No,
there's...
the planning department said that they could.
Yeah,
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
Since I'm in my office all the time, I've been working out of there and it's working fine. And the people that come in like to do the taxes, they come to my salon. My wife's a notary, so she notarizes the papers for them. It makes it easy.
And they get a free haircut in?
Yeah, you go.
Not a free haircut, get a haircut in while they're paying their...
So it's working right now. I mean, when there's another president, they'll have to make other changes, but...
No, you have to continue.
But, right now it works.
Doing such a great job.
I'm trying.
One last question regarding the Chapter 90. So in our meeting yesterday with Jill and Ray, it's my understanding that the BIDMA will still continue to apply for Chapter 90s to alert our subsidiaries and support services of the events and the need to staff them accordingly. But pursuant to 90-6, we, as the board, will be waiving any fees associated with
Yeah, there are fees, why would we pay ourselves?
I just want to be clear about that in the contract. I will draft that accordingly then.
Right.
So fees are waived, but they will follow the timely requirements of FONA for that Chapter 90.
Yes.
For information.
Yeah, we need that just for coordination.
And we've always done that, so we'll continue
Blah.
to do that.
Couple.
All right, so you're going to, really the only issue then is to check to see who in your accounting department is tax savvy enough to save that $2,500. Now you get a little bit of money. I know we can do it.
So
All right.
for
Thank
Tuesday?
you very much.
For Tuesday would be fine if you can get it done?
Can I
Okay.
get a final event schedule and a final counting of the numbers? So
Yeah,
I
I'm just
can
going to change the schedule. I'll mail it to the entire board. We've got the schedule for the...
Okay, good. All right, audit RFPs.
Thank you very much.
And Ray, you said you're working on the canvas with the Parking District, right?
Yes, it's going to be the subject of our next
You
meeting,
want to see it, have this?
Yeah, give me.
which is always been.
Yeah, and also, right,
No, there's the resume.
at the next Parking District meeting, I brought it up with Chief Hagermiller when I met with him yesterday.
That has to be...
People are speeding by on
I
that roadway on the
actually
riverfront.
changed some.
Oh, you
Okay,
made
good.
a change on it?
Because he said that he may have to change it through the state to make it a road throughout
Thanks
the
for looking
town
out
in
for
order
me.
for them to enforce it, write tickets, and put up speed limit signs.
You can copy it.
It's people, especially ones that you open and remove.
Okay,
You know,
yeah.
they're not that expensive either, so.
On where?
speed bumps on the roadway along the water.
Yeah, we know.
You take them out in the wintertime,
Hi.
plow stuff,
Right.
but in the summer you
How are
put
you?
them back in.
Yeah.
It's easy to do.
That's probably a good idea.
People are using it
They've
as a
got a
cut
job
through, so it's, they're racing through there.
Okay, audit RFPs, I hope everybody saw the email. I went through the audits with Bill Rothar, the Jack Orban, and the Independent Audit Committee went through the audits, and they looked at the different companies that submitted, and the feeling was, considering ABZ had done such a good job, is there a way to keep them but get a fresh set of eyes with ABZ? They were the bar against everything, against which everything was measured against. And after going through all the RFPs, there wasn't really a company that stood out that really would change anything. ABZ's price was relatively the same. I think it was $150,000. 150.
It was 160, 165.
The initial.
The initial, but they agreed to reduce it to 150.
Okay, because there was another company that does the audits for the town of Brookhaven that was at 135, so they were 30,000 less. Tusk and.
There's a difference. We made some phone calls, and I should go get my notes, but as I remember, they may not be supplying the audit. They may be doing, Brookhaven has, I think, somebody prepares the ledger, if I'm not mistaken, which is what you guys do. And then somebody else comes in and audits the ledger. And Toski or whatever was doing, I'm pretty sure that was the case in Brookhaven, I should have my notes, that Toski was doing the, they weren't doing the whole thing that ABZ was doing because they were doing the, preparing the ledger. That was either true of Brookhaven or Southampton, I'll go get my notes. But the point was, for us looking at it and for the audit committee looking at it, you know, because the way, the thought was, if there was something truly remarkable in somebody, one of these firms, that we were looking for that, to see if there was something truly remarkable with any of these firms, and we didn't really find any. Priced $15,000, you know, $135,000, $150,000, where we found out that they may not be looking at the same audit. That wasn't as much an issue because it wasn't the same audit. And then the other thing, ABZ, what we thought about was changing partners, so that even though it's ABZ, it would be a different partner. It wouldn't be Jeff DeVoli doing it, so you're getting a completely fresh set of eyes. And we sent the audit committee out with all the proposals, and they had a series of meetings, and they came back basically saying the same thing that I'm saying to you now, is that they felt that, and I forwarded Jack Orban's email to everybody, they felt that there wasn't really a sense to make any changes, and we're saving a significant amount of money from the previous audit. So I'd like to see, and I know I don't have the whole board here, but I'd like to see if we can get a resolution for Tuesday appointing ABZ, and George Wren was the CPF auditor. And it was the same backdrop. We looked at George Wren. He was the one that did it previously, to see if there was something earth-shattering that somebody else would do, and we didn't see it. The CPF audit is really inexpensive. Was it $2,500 or $35,000?
3,000.
Okay.
So the RFP that we sent out for these outside auditing companies, you're saying that Toski does not, or did not
Let me go get my notes.
Because
Oh, hold that thought. Let me get my notes.
I just want to know why they could do it for $30,000 less than ABZ. And now you're saying that ABZ came back down, but I don't know if that's the proper process in an RFP to get bids and then say, okay, well, we like you, so lower your price to this and we'll award it to you.
Yeah, actually that was, the town attorney was involved, not the deputy town attorney was involved. So everything was done.
Well, I'm sure it wasn't, you know, you'll get the job and come down the price, oh, that wasn't.
Andrew?
Yeah,
Andrew was, yeah, Andrew was involved.
because the if Tusky didn't include everything, that they do everything in their proposal, then maybe our RFP wasn't clear as to what they should be submitting a proposal on, which is why they came in, because from what the supervisor is saying is that they don't provide the same service that ABZ does, which is why ABZ was more.
Well, the only good thing for these is
So I-
they have the instrument.
I don't know, it's not that, I contacted people in other towns and certain firms, and I'm not gonna say which one on camera, because I don't think it's really appropriate, but certain people didn't get the clean bill of health. The towns were not happy with certain audits.
My big dilemma a few years ago, and I think this was, it was right as you took with this at Phil's last year, but we had the same company doing it time and time again, and we were looking to change. And that was controversial at the time. I thought it was important that we brought, since Jack wasn't here anymore last spring, let's get it all straightened out. And they did. They worked hard. They went all back. So now they got it up to snuff. And my whole thing was I always wanted to make sure that we never got into that point again where there might be friendships forged and, maybe a little less than professional service. But ABZ did an outstanding job. I read all their audit reports. Now they got it to a point where it should be simpler, or at least they know where to look. And you say that you're changing partners.
We would change we would require.
Which would be that fresh set of eyes that's important to me. So we're looking at a, what, 3-year contract?
Correct.
And then, in looking at this comparison, seeing as we are caught up with our audits, ABZ increases their fee for $5,000 every year, and I would like to see them keep it the same, seeing as we're caught up. So they go from $165 in 2012 to $170 in 2013 and $175 in 2014, where the other companies that submitted requests or submitted the proposals are either staying the same or their fees are going down.
ABZ's $150 for 2012, and I don't know what they said for the other years.
I thought they agreed to 150 full.
I thought it
Oh, that
was.
would be good.
This was the initial proposal.
Then I
This
would
is
be
what
happy
they
with that.
proposed.
Oh,
Yes. And the other thing too is, the other firms proposed more money in the initial year because they haven't done an audit here before. So it usually requires more time in the first year.
Oh, so
and
then ABZ should be coming down more from
No,
150? Because they have
you're talking about the other
familiarity with
firms
our
dropping
books?
down. The other firms are dropping down because they're not familiar. ABZ
I know, but they're
is picking
starting
up.
out lower too.
So if ABZ will do it for 150 for all 3 years, then we have 3 board members to support that here? Okay. So let's,
With
I
a
believe
different partner
As long as we got a different partner, I'm happy with that.
and a different
Yes.
partner, and Ren for the $3,000, is that fine?
That's for CPF?
CPF, yes.
Correct.
All right. So we got somebody else doing the trust and
Justice
agency
Court.
funds and all that? Or was that, our guys on that, right?
ABZ, it's like $30,000 for that too. They did it
So you're
last
gonna
time.
have the resolutions that are in your packets today.
Justice Court?
Oh, okay.
I was just curious because I'm being led to believe that different auditing companies submitted proposals on different things and not inclusive of our needs for the town. That they were doing ledger review and they were doing other reviews, which is why ABZ was charging more than the other companies that submitted, because the other companies weren't doing as much as ABZ.
No.
Well, all I can say is, we're not required to, but we did submit requests for proposals out for all these services. And ABZ met the comprehensive needs of the town with respect to the auditing services. So dollar for dollar, ABZ was the best selection for the town program.
So the other companies didn't submit a complete proposal of the town's needs, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it wasn't the best proposal.
Well, you could also make a point that they're probably not as familiar either.
Right.
As familiar with what?
Well, ABZ, I mean, ABZ really, they really picked up all the cards that were thrown about over the 10 years of one control. So now that there's safeguards in place, they really did extensive background and they really left no stone unturned.
Which is why I think their fee should be less.
Well, they did say
Because they have unturned all the stones and they do have familiarity with
They earn
it.
their money.
But every one of these was within the same price except one, and
Right, should be smoother this time.
the one that was really low, our suspicion is that they were bidding on preparing our financial statements. Many towns have an audit company do the ledger, and then they have another audit company do the audit. We prepare our own ledger. So if you, not that you want to just take out the lowest, but if you take out the lowest, all the other ones are, pretty close to the same price, all in that $150,000 range. So if we have three, we'll put that resolution up. All right, good. What do we have, dog legislation?
Who's that?
Scott, do you have anything else here? No? Thank you. No, you should stay if there's resolutions, just in case.
Yeah.
Okay. What are we doing, dog legislation?
Dog legislation. I have, copies of board members. Basically, what it's doing is it's modifying 3 provisions of the code. While we had a provision regarding the seizure and impound of dogs, we didn't have a section which listed those activities which enabled our officers, dog control officers and police officers, to seize and impound. We didn't have a provision which basically listed those activities as prohibited acts for which there could be a penalty. So that's number 1. Number 2, in the surrender provision, the way it was originally worded, anyone in the town of Riverhead could surrender a dog for a $25 fee. Now it basically provides that you can make application for the surrender of an animal. And that animal will be evaluated, and if it's approved, then upon payment of the fee.
I don't even want to do that, because I have 2 issues. Well, one issue is there's no room at the inn, so we're not taking surrenders because we don't have room at the inn. But wouldn't we want to rewrite this for the North Fork Animal Welfare?
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's what this is? And
Basically,
they're okay?
yeah.
Okay, then if that's it then.
But Mr. Supervisor, you are correct. I checked other towns. They don't have this provision at all in their code.
Yeah.
So this is a modification wherein it actually gives them discretion rather than an individual essentially being given a right to surrender for $25. The animal would be evaluated.
Is North Fork okay with this
Yes,
section of code? Because
absolutely.
this is going to be
Yeah.
what they need.
All these code amendments, they're in agreement with.
Then I love it. Jim, you okay?
Right.
Go ahead, read it, tell me
I
you
know
love
absolutely nothing about this, so this is my first sight of this. I can't comment.
Anything that makes North Fork Animal Welfare League happy makes me happy.
And then there's a simple.
Within reason.
And then there's a simple correction in 58-10 regarding the redemption period is 5 days under the law, not 7. So
Wait a minute. It shall be unlawful for a dog to urinate upon the premises of a person other than such dog or domestic animal? Wait a minute, now I'm reading this thing. Wait a minute.
Wait, can't urinate on people, was that? What is it?
3A3.
of a person other than the owner of such dog or domestic animal.
By defecating or urinating upon the premises of a person. So if I'm walking my dog in the neighborhood and he tinkles on my neighbor's lawn,
It says cause damage or destruction. Or
well,
commit a
suppose it
nuisance.
yellows the lawn a little bit.
Yeah, and that would,
Right.
the nitrogen.
Walk them in the
You're
right,
100%
walk them in the
right.
right away.
I agree
I
with you.
spoke too soon, Anne Marie.
But,
Where did that one go?
Well, I have to tell you, that's standard through like Southampton, Southold.
I say do away with that one.
All right, we can, if that's what you want.
You don't take it anywhere but your own lawn?
I'll leave it just cause
And you
damage
couldn't
or
walk your
destruction.
dog in the
So
neighborhood.
you let your dog use out your own lawn only?
Well, you'd
And what
have to,
happens when he has to go to the bathroom? Do we have to put a cup underneath the
you'd have
dog?
to stay in the public right of way, is what you'd have to do, not let you do.
Yeah, but even, you know what, a lot of the public right-of-ways are being maintained by the property owner because the road may
Well,
never be
we
widened,
thank
and
them
so
for
the
it.
sprinklers
We'll
are in
give them a
there,
little
or
extra
the grass is
fertilizer.
green all the way up to the curb, and we like that. But we don't want a property owner going, hey, I take care of that one, and your dog is in the right of
We're
way.
fertilizing it, we're doing them a favor.
No, I had someone that came in yesterday that walks her dog that says that the guy is saying, oh, I put extra pesticides on the lawn today for your dog, and she was like,
Oh, boy.
so, you know, do away with that one.
So
I agree with Sean.
Can I leave it just causes damage or destruction
Yes.
to property of a person?
Do we
other than the
we
owner?
don't have a pooper scooper law, though, do we?
Oh my God.
Well, we had that before.
I don't know.
Well, you had it here. As a stored property or habitually trespassing manner, commits a nuisance on the property of person on that.
Yeah.
I like that
Okay,
better than
great.
this.
Good. I'll put that right back in.
Glad I read this.
Good. Done.
My goodness.
Plus in B, it's in B2, B3 too, so
Yeah.
it's redundant.
Hey, come on, this is sausage, not politics. We're making law here.
Shows
I
vicious
think it-
habits or molests passerby. We're off the public street.
Or molests
We
passerby.
had that. That's originally in our code. I did not modify that. That existed.
Yeah, it's excellent.
That existed.
Wow, that is some verbiage.
Yeah, because you know what, most dogs, they will bark at other dogs that are passing by, and the owner could take
That was
that as
in
their
the
dog.
code.
I
That's
can't
what I
comment
want my
without being.
dog to do. That's how your dog protects your premises.
So I'll make the changes.
That change is good, the other one.
Molest, passerby, or otherwise harass. I think that's redundant too.
It's in the code.
Okay.
Come on, Emery, we know you came up with all this
No, I
stuff.
didn't.
Well, you don't have to surrender your dog.
You just get a fine.
You can get a fine.
I think we're gonna have to.
And I know the Ag's Marcus law is 5 days.
Well, then that should be in
Riverhead had
here,
7
right?
days.
The fine should be in here, no?
And why is it
There's
going
a
back
fine,
to 5
$100
days?
for each
Are you ready for it?
offense, 50 for the first and 100 for subsequent.
And so what's interesting is
Yeah, oh,
prior
you
to
know
this
what? Wait, let me
amendment,
get Ray over
you
here,
actually
though.
didn't
Hold on.
have a penalty provision which applied to those dogs at large, destruction of property.
When I was deputy town attorney, there was one person that paid this on a regular basis.
Is there what?
I gotta say a word.
I was going to say, you shall not disclose. All right, so I'll make the change.
Okay, thank you. What else we got? Dog legislation, pilot program, is Gary Pensick here and,
I think we're gonna bump the resolutions.
That's 11:30.
Yeah.
okay, let's do resolutions.